Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Charles. How are you?
Morning.
Well, I feel a lot better than I did yesterday afternoon.
Well, that's good. What did you do?
Went to sleep.
That helps a lot, doesn't it?
It did, yeah. No, after class, I wasn't, like feeling horrible or anything, but I just didn't feel good, and I was kind of achy and stuff.
Yeah.
And went downstairs, hung out on the couch for a while till I could actually check out, for the day, and signed out, crawled back on the couch, and fell asleep. And was kind of in and out till about 10:30, and then finally went to bed. Woke up this morning, so no, I feel a lot better. But yeah, that little shot, it kind of affected me probably more this time than it did the first two times.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Same thing. But
Yeah.
I think my reaction was a little more severe than yours. But,
Mm-hmm.
yes, had a reaction.
Yeah, but for the most part, I mean, I'm fine now. But definitely, yeah, just went to bed. So
Which ones did you all have? Was it the Moderna?
No, I had the Pfizer.
Pfizer. I had Moderna.
Yeah,
I had Moderna.
Yeah, Moderna. Yeah. I actually asked them about that. I follow 3 different endocrinologists, and listen to, their podcasts and programs on a fairly regular basis. One guy in particular who is at the University of, San Francisco, where I went and did my medical study at. He seems to have a pretty good bead on what's going on with Corona. And the 3 of them were all pretty much so in agreement at the very beginning that this is going to be a 5-year cycle, when it showed up. And that's, kind of like best case scenario.
What do you mean, 5-year cycle?
That they couldn't find they weren't going to be able to develop a vaccine in time to stop the spread of it, and that it was going to be around for at least 5 years, before we saw any significant change. But what they were saying, and they were all pretty much so in agreement from the very beginning, is that as it goes through different populations, it's going to mutate.
Mm-hmm.
And as it mutates, it's going to become less lethal to humans because it's adapting to living in the human body. And,
well, either that or it becomes more lethal.
Yeah, they were guessing less. That's kind of what they were banking on. And it has so far.
So far, so good.
Yeah. And so, if they're right and, this thing continues to track the way it has been, Omicron is not the last variation we're going to see.
No, it's not.
Yeah, we're going to see multiple other ones. But in the end, what they're saying at this point is in the next 2 to 3 years, this thing will be like getting the common cold, of which COVID is actually a cold virus. So, So it's kind of interesting, to kind of track what these guys are saying. And, they were, they're very much so on the side of, getting a vaccine, getting people vaccinated, trying to, save as many lives as possible. But at this point, their view is, okay, we've done everything we can do to this point, and rather than mandating lockdowns and things like that, really focus on the people who this thing affects in a drastic way. So older people, in particular, people with, compromised immune issues, things like that, and focus our resources there, because that's, those are the people who end up in intensive care and end up dying. So
Yeah, I'm waiting for them to bring out the under 5 vax,
mm-hmm.
so my granddaughter can be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And that may happen before the end of the month.
Yeah, there's some talk. I think, is it Pfizer that's coming out? I think they're.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one. I actually looked at it, but I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, I think it was Pfizer who was looking for FDA approval for under 5 at this point. They seem to be the ones who are kind of moving the most quick, the quickest to get things out on market. And if they can do it.
Awesome, because the FDA has been very slow. I used to work with Northrop Grumman out at the Center for Disease Control, and they have such challenges and have to meet so many regulations to get these vaccines out. And with the kids, it wasn't as straightforward as with the adults.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of look at that as, I'm very thankful they have all those hurdles to have to jump, because without them, a lot of people, might not be safe, taking those vaccines. So.
Yeah, we're the most, I don't know how to say, the most stringent in the world as far as getting everything tested before it can be approved. So a lot of times it's a 5-year process.
Yeah, but the payoff there in the end is, you don't have some of the horrible mistakes that have happened in other places in the world with vaccines and things like that. And there have been, occurrences where, vaccines have not worked out so well, had long-term, consequences to them. So. Yeah,
especially, well, there have been some groups experimented upon, which I'm not even going to go there this morning. It makes me ill every time I think about it.
Yeah, we could, yeah, that's going down one of those roads.
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Looks like a lot of them are here this morning.
Really? Let's see. I only see about 5 of you so far. There's 8 of
7.
May I say good morning, everybody?
No, we're not going to let you say good morning.
Okay.
Good morning, Armando. I'll say good morning.
Good morning, Armando.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Yeah. Is everybody doing okay?
Yeah. And you?
I'm good. I'm good.
We just got the update on after class activities spent on the couch.
Yeah, there was I would call it inactivity. Yeah, there was a lot of inactivity last night here.
But you were convalescing.
I was sleeping. That's I mean, it was just kind of like, this doesn't feel good. I'm just gonna go to sleep, and I did.
Yeah.
And,
you have a good nurse at home, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. At any rate, I woke up this morning though, and my plan for this class today is I was going to share a variety of artists with you, but I've changed my mind on that a little bit. I'm going to mainly focus on one guy, and then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about that still life show at the Cobb Marietta Museum that we never got to. Okay, we looked at part of the Hispanic show, didn't get through it all. But I figured that by the time we look at the amount of work that I have here, we're easily going to fill the 2 hours that we have. But before we jump into that, again, this morning I got up and got a message through Facebook about, I think it was Sunday, But it was weird. I got this message, but I couldn't open it, right? And had no idea what it was about. Well, finally, I was able to actually get to it. And it's a lady, I don't know where she's at, but she sent me a photograph of a piece of artwork and, basically asking, did you do this? And oddly enough, it is really, it's something from about the time when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Okay. It's that far back. And I want to show it to you. It's interesting. And the context for this is that when I created this piece of art, I was working as an art director, and I was working here in Atlanta. I had just moved here, and I was, well, this company had hired me as an art director. Before then, I was doing, freelance and, working independently. Let me see if I can find it. I've got to dig through all this stuff.
See the Eskimo face, Eskimo person face.
An Eskimo, yes.
Yes, Eskimo, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Inuit.
yeah. So what this is this is one of about 20 illustrations that I did for a company called American Express. And American Express at the time they were a credit card, but they're also a travel agency. And so we did a series of illustrations, for the travel folks. And, we did all over, mainly all over the United States. So we did like, Southern California and, like San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, Miami, New York, just all over the place. And like I said, I was working as a art director there. But this gave me an opportunity to actually create some illustration work. And so this is one of the illustrations that I created. And I have no idea how she ended up with it, But, I'm glad to see that, somebody's taking care of it. It's framed and under glass and seems to be like it's in pretty good shape. So, but yeah, this is like, out of the blue, it's like every once in a while, people find you, and so it's kind of, I haven't seen this in forever. This would have been, probably, like 1987 or 88, when I did this. So.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is the part of the painting on the far right, is that a church? Is it steeples? I can't really tell what it is.
Yeah, it's a Russian Orthodox church.
I wondered, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's in California, Alaska?
In Alaska.
Alaska.
Yes.
Is that the one in Sitka, Charles?
I think that's the one in Kodiak.
Kodiak.
Okay, that would make sense that you would have had access to that. Rick and I went into the first Russian Orthodox church in North America that was in Sitka.
Mm-hmm.
It
Okay.
was a pretty amazing church.
Yeah. Yeah. If any of you kind of think back to your high school history, Russia used to claim, basically what's now the state of Alaska, and it was traded to us for a really paltry sum. Really, when you get down to it, we
bought it.
Yeah, we bought it. Yeah, we didn't spend a lot of money on it, and at the time, the Russians wanted to get rid of it because it wasn't worth a lot of money to them. Basically, they had settled that area because of the fur trade. And, and that, sometimes worked out okay, often not. So they got rid of it, and they thought that they made a pretty good deal.
Okay, no.
And
Okay.
so they sold it to, the United States, and we settled it. It finally became a state, and but there's still a lot of Russian influence, in Alaska, as far as the architecture and things like that. Because a lot of those towns, like Sitka, Kodiak, things like that, they were originally, Russian settlements, for the fishing and fur trade. So,
Mhm.
so not much has changed there. But just, getting back onto the art side of this, how this was done is it's basically acrylic paint. It's acrylic and Prismacolor pencil.
Now, he looked to me like he's about to cry.
And or it's a very bright sunny day, and
Oh,
Squinting.
yeah, the glare on the ice up there is pretty intense. So yeah, you need a good set of polarized sunglasses up there. Those are highly prized. So, but basically, I blocked in, put in all of the layers, of base color, and got my big shapes blocked in, and then I worked over it with Prismacolor pencil to build up a lot of the shift in value and tone, particularly like on his face and on the killer whale and the artwork, things like that. So this is technically it would be considered a mixed media piece. But how that worked is, and this is probably like 40 inches long, in size, so it's fairly large. And they were all pretty good size boards. And after this, we sent them, to basically have color separations done, and to have it sized down. And this is pre-computer, right? So they had to be sized down, to the size that they were going to go into the ad on the page, and and then they were composited together with all the text and everything else, and then printed, and it was printed in magazines and things, particularly travel magazines, like literally all over the world. So and like I said, this is like one of 20, the series that I did for them. So
did you get back in touch with the lady to find out where she got it?
well, again, I was able to open it this morning, and I sent her back a message, kind of fessing up to the fact that, this is mine, and I did it,
You recognize it?
yeah, it's one of your children, it's, never forget your children, but, I got back to her and I asked her, I haven't heard back from her,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd be interested to kind of hear how she acquired it, because as far as I knew, all of this stuff, was in a vault somewhere, with American Express. So, but evidently that's not the case. So they,
Somebody did a house cleaning?
yeah, but it could have been where they had these and they said, well, let's get them framed, hang them around the office, and somebody retired, and that was in their office, and they took it home. It was part of their decor. I don't know. It's could have gotten out in the world all kind of different ways. But like I said, I'm just glad to see that somebody matted it, framed it, and, for as old as it is, it looks like it's in actually, not bad shape. So,
And
anyway,
you said this is one of 20?
yeah, yeah, I did a whole series of about 20.
You don't know which one of the 20 it is?
Well, yeah, this is the Alaska thing. They had different like travel tours that you could book, and this is the kind of like the Inland Passage tour,
Yeah.
through American Express, and so
It's a nice trip, by the way.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah. I've
done it twice.
Yeah, I've actually never done that tour, but it's something that, I've wanted to do for a while. You know.
Beautiful. Absolutely just beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Now with most of the glaciers melting and kind of going away, I don't know that it would be that spectacular, but it's.
Well, there's Hubbard Glacier is still growing.
Mhm.
So not all of them are going away. And it really depends on who you travel with and what you get
Yeah.
to see. So you have to be very introspect on that, especially on the second tour up there.
Yeah. And even their melting is still cold there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got to mush an Iditarod team up on one of the top of the Mendenhall Glacier. It's amazing. And 5 miles across looks like, 10 feet.
Anyway, all right. So there's, let's.
Well, thank you. That's a
yeah.
good intro.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. It was kind of an interesting way of starting the day. Like I said, it's like your past, tends to creep up on you every once in a while. So anyway, I'm going to start today with an artist who, most of you are probably unfamiliar with. I certainly was, but certainly an impressive artist. He's probably in his 40s now, I would say.
That old, huh?
Well, no, he was he was born in 1965, so
More than that then.
Well, he's a kid in front of us.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah. So he's 10 years younger than I. So he's about 56 right now.
He's 35 years younger than me.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting guy though. He grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and ended up going to the School of Art and Design in Columbus, and it's one of the smaller commercial art schools, but it's still a very, very good school, and it's got a good reputation for doing all kinds of like classical art, painting, sculpture, things like that. Anyway, his name is Ron Hicks. Okay. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Get the right one. Anyway, his name is Ron Hicks, and he's African American. But like I said, grew up up in the Midwest, and I'm going to close this so we can see kind of the full screen. And this is kind of the bio, that was posted for him. And if you go back and you look at how his work has sort of evolved over time, it's really pretty interesting because, he had a very strong, very kind of classical approach to his work. And as he's gotten older and more mature, his work has shifted, and he has kind of what you might kind of consider a mixed media look and approach to his work. So we're going to go from here, and I'm going to just begin to jump into the work itself. And the work that we're going to look at first, well, actually, no, I'm going to change. Okay, I'm going to look at the other panel of work first, because I want to start with where he kind of started at and what it kind of evolved into.
He has a lot of work about people kissing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, his early work was really kind of all about, relationships of people. Okay, can everybody see the couple at the table?
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, but look at the lighting, and kind of look at the way he uses color. You know, it's very kind of subdued. You know, it's what you would almost consider tonalist, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And but you know, it's got this very nice kind of soft feel to it, right? And and that was you know, pretty common in most of his earlier work, I would say. And also look at look at how he uses like the paint and the paint stroke, and how sort of things are very loose, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
You know, like the folds on the pants and the jacket and everything. You know, you know, there's a lot of kind of wiggly, you know, movement and stuff in the paint and the line, the way he lays it down. So the paint has this kind of, you know, very lively, you know, sort of active feel to the surface. And you contrast that with the mood of the piece, which is, you know, very kind of sedate, very calm, right? So it kind of creates a contrast there. Now, this is probably one of his more recent works. And remember, we just had this conversation about using color and how using temperature, intensity, you know, and value,
Uh-huh.
you can, you know, create this illusion of things becoming three-dimensional,
Mhm.
you know. And this is a really good example of it. Look at the color shift of the generally warmer, see, not warm, but warmer temperature, you know, in the lower part of the face. And as it moves back, you know, onto, you know, the back of the head, the skull here, now
Very
it's
cold.
cooler. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a very warm, cool shift going on there. Same thing, you know, within the vertebra and other bones of the skeletal structure. Again, you know, a much warmer side, you know, going to a cooler side in comparison. Now, would you, in looking at, if you just isolated the color, like right in this area where the cursor is,
Mhm.
would you describe that as a warm color or a cool color?
Depends on what it's next to.
Yes. Okay. But generally, you know, it's, if we wanted to identify that, what color
It's
do you
warm,
think?
cool.
Huh?
It's a warm, cool.
I would say warm. Yeah.
Well, it appears to be warm here. Okay. But in fact, it's, if we identify the color or isolate it just by itself, it's really kind of a green, isn't it?
Mm.
I'm not seeing a green.
Well, the head is warm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The top of the head and that part of the bunch. Yes.
Yeah. You don't see that as kind of a greenish kind of color in there.
I'm seeing kind of a red.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a reddish tones in there as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of seeing purples and greens and blues and things all down in here.
Oh, yeah, some in different places. I
Yeah.
thought you were saying right at the cursor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like right in there, it looked green to me, and then I blew it up, and now it kind of looks like there's green and purple and stuff in there. But yeah, I would generally describe that area of the painting as generally kind of being in a green family, right? And green, you know, if you divide the color wheel, you know, in half, you know, with, you know, red, yellow, and orange on one side, and then, you know, blue, green, and violet on the other, you know, green sits, you know, generally what we call the green side or the cool side of the palette, right? Well, in this case, and that's what I was saying, is the conversation in talking about color, and particularly when you're talking about temperature and intensity, it's always relative, you know, because it's always a comparative conversation. You know, we're always comparing this against this, you know, or something else. Now, when you begin to compare this very same area against, say, an area in the background,
Ooh.
all of a sudden it's cool. You know, this is considerably cooler than, you know, the area where the light is, right? So, you know, that's something I want all of you to keep in mind. You know, when you're looking at a painting and you're trying to figure out what somebody is doing, and part of the analytical process of looking at this is figuring out, okay, you know, what are the relationships? You know, how does that particular part of the painting that, you know, this artist worked on, you know, how does that relate to the rest of it? And so, you know, you can begin to understand, you know, what he was doing, you know, and why, you know, why he or she made the choices that they did, you know, in using color. So,
That's nice. Nice study. I like that.
yeah. And you find that, you know, you find that throughout all of his paintings. Now, this is a, you know, a more recent painting. And this is kind of the style that he has shifted to. So his work has changed considerably. You know, still figurative, you know, still does, you know, a whole variety of people. Generally, he does more women than men. But he's putting them in a different context. You know, all of the backgrounds have gotten to be these sort of almost abstract, you know, white backgrounds, and he's playing these figures against it. And in a sense, when you look at a piece of work like this kind of reminds me of, you know, Art Nouveau and like Klimt in particular. Not as decorative as Klimt, but the flow of the figure and the line, you know, the way he more or less renders the form and the face, you know, and then he throws in these little sort of graphic, you know, elements, you know, in the process.
Yep.
So it's an interesting transition, you know, to see, you know, where he came from, you know, painting things like this, right? And again, you know, this is, you know, very kind of tonalist, impressionistic, you know, in feel, and it has a very traditional approach to the painting process. And the reason I say that is if you look at this painting, there's an overall kind of warm feeling under, you know, as an undertone in this painting in there. You can see a lot of orange and brown and stuff kind of popping through the blue, can't you?
Yeah.
Okay. And what that tells you is that there was a prematura, okay, an underpainting, you know, underneath all of the color. And that, you know, he's actually left a good deal of that initial, you know, underpainting showing through, you know, and becoming part of the finished work, you know, which was a very kind of traditional American impressionist
Naylor,
way
yeah.
of working. Yeah, somebody.
Taylor. Come here. It looks like he has a lot of European subjects and style.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's.
That looked like Venice, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one does.
yeah, I would definitely guess that this is Venice, right? I don't know about the whole European thing. There are some, you know, references to you know, places in Europe and things. The main thing was, you know, figures, I think, for him. And again, this is kind of a contemporary, you know, piece. And you can kind of begin to see where he's kind of moving, you know, into what he's now kind of creating, which are these white backgrounds, you know, and the figures just sort of silhouetted. This looks kind of like maybe a piece in transition, you know, going there from where he had been. But again, you know, the color is very subdued. You know, there are hints of color there, you know, but they're very, very subtle. And if you begin to look, you know, into the skin tones in particular, you know, there is no one color there.
Mm-mm.
You know, it's very nuanced. It's very layered. You know, again, you know, he's using that process of creating what we call open or broken paint passages, you know, to let these layers show through and create a much more dynamic, interesting surface, you know, to his painting than if you just took a brush, mixed up a big pile of paint, and, you know, threw it up there. So,
What is the artist's name again?
his name is Ron Hicks.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's in Denver, Colorado these days. And like I said, you know, he's a, you know, African American, you know, but seems to be doing really, really well. You know, selling a lot of art, you know, getting a lot of notice, you know, beginning to get collected, you know, pretty widely by a lot of different institutions and things. So, but, you know, very capable artist, very, you know, well trained, definitely has spent a lot of time looking at, you know, people like, you know, Cecilia Bow, singer, you know, John Singer Sargent, you know, a lot of the American impressionists. In particular, you may not be as familiar with his work. There was another American impressionist, and it's something about his brushwork that really kind of reminds me of an impressionist by the name of Twatchman, okay, which is Twatchman. You know,
I
painted
think
up.
we've looked at some of his work before.
Yeah,
earlier.
I mentioned him. I mentioned him before, but you know, in looking at the way that you know, he uses the brush and layering of color and stuff, it reminds me a lot of Schwarzman's work. You know, which were beautiful paintings, but you know, really, really, just really nice use of color. And you know, we were talking again about, you know, warm, cool. Okay, so you've got the female figure. You know, he's got generally the color, it's kind of this fleshy tone. But in areas, you know, it gets more red or pink. And then he contrasts that in shadow with these kind of olivey greens. You know? And it sets up this really nice complementary contrast, you know, in the painting itself.
A hint of Degas here as well.
Yeah, in subject, yeah. Yeah, certainly.
Do you know who he studied with or what his big influences were? I mean, as he studied.
Yeah, not really. I mean, you know, he went to and graduated from, you know, the Columbus, what is it, School of Art and Design.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, and like I said,
There's an extensive biography on his website. If you want to check it out, Gwen.
Okay.
yeah. I mean, you know, there's a fair amount of information out there about him. He's still alive. He's still working. You know, he's still doing stuff. And like I said, you know, there's a lot of people paying attention to what he's doing and collecting his work. You know, but you know, his use of paint, you know, his approach is, you know, I think a really good sound one, and he's been well trained. He's got the ability to keep his work very loose, kind of free, and yet, in a sense, accurate, which is always, you know, kind of a nice combination to have out there, because it creates interesting paintings like this painting here. There's no boring section, you know, or area in this painting. You know, all of the surfaces are very active, and there's a lot of color and layering and nuance in there. And yet, he controls all that very well, with, bringing your eye back to the focal point, which is, the lady sitting in front of the mirror with the lamp behind her. And even suggesting, the translucency of the dress and the light, coming through even down here in the shadow area. So, very competent painter, really, really good, at what he does. Again, this is a more contemporary piece. This is kind of what he's doing now. And, just really nice, rich, beautiful paint surfaces. And, Lady, I saw you here earlier.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Take a look at what he's doing, in the background and how he's, using like torn pieces of paper and things like that, collaging them into the background. In many ways, it kind of reminds me of some of the work that you've done in the past.
Right. It is very, very nice. I noticed that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, he's not afraid to use, all kinds of different materials and things in there and embed it in the paint. Now, for the most part, I think he's doing oil. Okay. But, I think the foundations of his paintings are generally acrylic. And then he works oil over that. So again, it's a kind of a multi-stage process, that he's working with these days. It's not just straight oil painting, but he understands, the process of building up paint layers and things like that, and does some really, really nice stuff.
The skin tones are amazing,
Yeah, they're all kind of color,
yeah.
in those flesh tones. Here's another example. Now, this is probably an earlier piece of work. Again, a different, approach, more traditional approach, to painting. But, a lot of what he had here, he's retained and brought into, what he's doing now. And one of the reasons that, I picked him was because, if you get a big enough collection or body of his work to look at, you begin to see this, process of evolution, of how he's changed, as an artist, and kind of, the direction that he's chosen to head into. And, that's basically, what all of us as artists, kind of hope for, is that, we don't stay static. The way I paint today was not the way I painted 20 years ago. And, if I hang around for another 20 years, how I'll be painting 20 years from now is not how I'm painting today. There'll be different concerns, different things that I'll be addressing. But you don't lose, you don't lose the foundation, where you started from. You just kind of evolve and build on top of that. And it, creates this really interesting story for each and every artist as to, how they evolved, and became what they became. This is unfortunate, the fact that this is such a small, low resolution image. But again, it's a beautiful painting. And if you look at the, how it was composed, the light and dark patterns, as best you can tell, the surface, behind the figure, really, really nicely done.
So this was one of his more recent ones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've got a whole portfolio of his more recent work to show. This is kind of mixed up with this one. Again, kind of a more traditional approach. So. And, from very early on, it seems like, his main focus was really the figure, which is great. You know, if you can kind of hone in on something that you really love to do, early on, as an artist, and then stick with that and develop it. Yeah. But, his figures are all really well done, good proportion, good use of color to create, form, on the figures and movement. They don't look static. I haven't seen any of his figures that look, kind of stiff or static or dead. I like this piece. It's a beautiful piece. And, to go from, a clearly representational, image of a human face, and then, the suggestion of a figure in movement, and yet, it's so abstract, and again, it gets very close to Klimt in the sense that, it becomes kind of a decorative element, rather than, a body. And, so here he is working in the studio. Little PR shot there. We all need those. But yeah. But again, here's like one of the earlier, paintings that he did. Another one.
That's nice.
Yeah, there's really not anything, out there that you can see of his that you don't, that you don't want to take, a few minutes and really look at carefully. And just, kind of as, as a painter, and or an artist, there's all kinds of little, gems that you can kind of pick up, from his work, and just looking at it, kind of trying to figure out, how he did what he did. So. Again, really nice play of, temperature, warmer areas, cooler areas, value, edges, it's all there. Those 5 types of contrasts that I can't get all of you to remember, he's got them all there.
You may have to add a number 6 to that list.
What?
Because, well, one of the paintings you had were well, of his, but basically the effect of having a fairly well rendered face, and the body is excruciatingly abstract, but you still know what's going on. So that style would be a 6th element to your to your list.
Yeah, I don't know if it really qualifies as a contrast in itself. But again, it kind of goes with, hard and soft edges.
But I mean, it seems to me that's a little more extreme than just hard and soft edges.
It is. Yeah, it's pushing. Yeah, it's pushing a little bit further. But Gustav Klimt did that too. So
Sure.
it's not a uniquely new idea. And when you look at somebody, like this gentleman, you can clearly see that, you know, he's taken a lot of time to look at art, to study history, to be familiar with all these different art movements and what they were all about. And, you know, he's kind of picked, you know, different elements from different artists and, you know, the things that he responded to and began to kind of incorporate it into, you know, his own process of creating images.
So, you know, there's a good example of what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you know, you can look at this and you can put it in a context of a room or a bed, you know, with a room or something, you know, that it's sitting in. But all of, you know, but where's it at? Reality is all of this is just abstract paint, right? Until you really get to, you know, this area right here.
The interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great way of focusing the eye, you know, to, you know, a very specific point in the painting. You know, that play of something that you can easily recognize, you know, in the sense of realism against something that is, you know, just totally abstract, you know, kind of absurdly, you know, rendered, you know, as a figure, you know, because there's nothing in here that suggests figure really. And if it wasn't tied to the context of the interaction of, you know, the arms and the face, you would never, in fact, let's just do that.
It's interesting because you can't, the emotion is confusing. You can't tell if she's pushing him away or going to see him. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, because she's kind of looks like she's intimidated and pushing, but
yeah, it's kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, the emotion. The emotion is interesting. It's almost up to the viewer to decide.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you look at the expression on the faces,
Yep.
it could be kind of adversarial, you know?
Yep.
It's very intense, you know, and it doesn't necessarily look like this warm, soft, you know, sort of romantic, you know, situation.
Nope.
But, you know, here's what I'm talking about. See, if you just isolate, you know, and we know that this is part of the jacket. Is there a jacket there?
Not there.
No.
Nope.
See, it's just, you know, it's the suggestion, you know, and this is something I talk about often, is oftentimes it's more powerful in your painting rather than trying to pick out all the nuances and details of something, to just suggest that it's there. You know, because again, it's like you keep the conversation open with the viewer, you know, the person who's, you know, actually looking at this, you know, far down the line from, you know, when you created it. And what happens is, you know, they see the two figures, they read that as this guy's jacket. And because there's not a lot of detail there, their experience, their mind begins to fill in, you know, the details of what he's wearing. See? And so it makes it a personal experience in viewing this piece of art, because you're bringing your own experience, you know, to it. So.
But the only way that really happens in this one, if you pull back, is the expression on the two people's faces. Because if that expression wasn't there, then a lot of this other extraneous wouldn't mean much.
Yeah.
Charles, it'd be interesting to know what the title of this particular painting was. It might give you a hint.
Yeah. When I downloaded these, you know, there were no titles on them. So, but I could go back and try to research it. You know. But yeah, it's an interesting, yeah, kind of what's really going on there. And he has a lot of that. When we get to some of his more recent work, there's a lot of that going on. But again, his whole thing has been the human figure, but it's not just the figure. It's sort of the relationships, the sort of interpersonal relationships of people. Like these two women. You have to ask yourself, kind of what's going on. Okay, so they're hanging out. They could be, friends in high school or something, and she's got a book. She's stretched out across the bed. And she looks like she's not. She's not dressed to go outside. She's definitely kind of like, in her nightgown or something. And yet, she's in kind of regular street clothes. And so, they're hanging out, having some kind of conversation, between the two of them. And look at the composition, and the lighting. So, you get this really strong, kind of composition where you move up through the figure, to her, right? And then from her, you kind of come back across, and back down again. See? So he's moving your eye, through this painting, in a very sort of intentional way. And I don't know whether you've noticed it or not, but look at the little face right back
I
here.
just saw that.
Yeah.
Is that a portrait or is that somebody looking on or what?
I'm not sure, I mean, I guess it could be a painting that's hanging on the wall in the room, but it sort of suggests, the idea that, maybe they're being watched. See? And so there's all these little subtle hints, in his work. So it's, it's interesting. Now this is something, again, I think this is kind of an intermediate stage because I haven't seen a lot of this from him. But again, it's like taking that use of something that's clearly representational, and then taking the figure and suggesting it, in really kind of abstract marks, is really what it all comes down to. Now, there's a contemporary art movement that's going on right now. And I've mentioned it, and it's called, deconstructive painting. And a lot of, if you go into a lot of galleries, or, galleries that will show figurative work in particular, it seems to be a very popular approach these days, where we saw some of it. We saw some of it when we looked at the show at the Cobb Merida Museum, how they were taking the figure, and then it's a representational figure that you can see, but then they're bringing in abstract elements and breaking the figure up. And so that seems to be a lot of what he's doing as well. And so it definitely is kind of a more, contemporary approach. Let's see. So let's take a look at and this generally has more of the contemporary work, stuff that he's doing now. And we'll start at the top. So, again, keep in mind how close he is to where he began, in the sense of, his subject matter. See, he's still having the same kinds of conversations, about relationships between people. And yet, he's evolved his work into something that's, very different looking. It's not traditional in any way. And it becomes, this very almost abstract painting. And to me, just looking at the paint surfaces and things, so familiar, to looking at like Klimt's work.
What
And
was going on in Klimt's time that he produced what he did?
well, it was, Klimt was an interesting study because he was not a traditional portrait painter. And in fact, he was not really a traditional artist in any real way. He definitely had a very commercial viewpoint of creating art. And, he created art, for a purpose, and that guided or influenced a lot of what he did. Because a lot of his work were commissions of murals and interiors of like theaters and public buildings, things like that.
Hmm.
And that's always what he wanted to do. And so,
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
yeah. And so,
So large paintings.
Oh yeah. Well, not traditionally paintings. There were like painted murals, to fill some of the galleries and spaces. But also a lot of the, details and designs in, architectural trim and finishes and things. That was his interest, was really, finishing out the interiors, of these buildings. And, he was kind of the right person at the right time, in the sense that, he came along and there was this movement particularly in France, but also through Northern Europe, of, Art Nouveau. And Art Nouveau, nobody ever called it Art Nouveau at the time.
Only in retrospect.
Yeah, it was given that name like 40 or 50 years after the art movement was over. Okay. And what they did is they ended up, basically throwing all of these decorative art movements, into one label of Art Nouveau. But, you had the Jugendstil in Northern Europe, which also, extended down into Austria. In Austria, they basically, called themselves secessionist artists.
The secessionist?
Secessionist, yeah. Yeah, Klimt would have seen himself as a secessionist artist. Okay, that was their movement. And it was defined that way. During their own time.
How do you spell secessionist? Like SESS?
Yeah, SECESSION.
Okay.
IFT, secessionist.
Secessionist.
Yeah. At any rate, they all got lumped together under Art Nouveau. And historically, the artists that get, the most attention, was that, movement in France, particularly around Paris. But the thing is, it wasn't isolated, it really was kind of a broader art movement, much like, and they all kind of took their influences from another art movement called arts and crafts, which originally started in like Scotland and spread to England and then into France and everything else. Also,
so Macintosh would have been part of that.
Yeah. But you see, Macintosh was much earlier than Art Nouveau by 40 years. So,
oh, I didn't realize there was that great deal of separation.
Yeah, I think it was about a 40-year gap, between, well, you had Macintosh, you also had, what was his name? William Morris, and see, they were contemporaries. And, Macintosh read a lot of Morris's writings. And then, of course, Morris influenced the pre-Raphaelites in England, right? It went back to sort of this medieval Gothic, but very decorative painting style. People like William Waterhouse, Rossetti, folks like that. And that, kind of flowed back over into France, and they had kind of developed, through the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, but in the industrial arts, they kind of looked back to, that revolt against, like industrial production, mass production of stuff, and back to handcrafted, something that had this human feel to it. Somebody made this. And that's kind of what drove all these art movements, was that kind of backlash against the industrialization, of all of these trades, and so you were losing that sense of craft. And that's taken us a long way away from, talking about Ron Hicks' work, but, you can't talk about his work without understanding, his influences and where that came from. Which goes
Well,
back.
thank you for the diversion there, but that made things come together for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but when you look at contemporary art, I think a lot of the artists who are creating the work, have taken the time to look back, at art history and about what that was all about, and then to try to reinterpret it, in a contemporary way, and I think he's very successful at doing exactly what he's doing, because it's got elements of both, Now, you go 100 years down the line from now, will you see this guy's name out there? Who knows? I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens next. And directions of, how the art movement in general in this country goes. But he's certainly a great candidate, for, being pretty much so iconic of the time that we live in now. So. That what we're looking at right now, this is not an 1800s painting. This could have never been done in the 1800s. This is definitely a 21st century painting. And yet, at the same time, it's an homage to 1800 styles of painting, as well as, abstract expression. And the Jurgen Steel movement, the Secessionists, Art Nouveau, they're all influences in this piece of work. And it makes a beautiful image. So.
Boy, there's a lot going on in that one.
Again, I think this is, one of his sort of transitional sort of paintings. Going from a very traditional approach to a more contemporary approach.
I love that one.
Yeah, this is gorgeous. This is just, I mean,
It speaks.
Yeah, you want to, you know, I mean, it's delicious, you know, in the sense of color and contrast and just, you know, this soft sort of ethereal feel to it. And
Hmm.
materials, you know, really rich, you know, textural surfaces.
Lots of different colors in that.
Oh yeah, everything's there, you know. But yeah, look at the paint surface.
Thick paint.
Well, thick, thin, scraped off, layered, you know, really nuanced stuff. And the thing is, you look at this and you begin to get a sense of understanding of how the painting evolved, how the painting developed. You know, at one point in time, he had a fairly complete figure under there, and he's gone back and, you know, he's actually, you know, blurred out and softened and, you know, more or less deconstructed, you know, parts of the figure, you know, kind of sacrificed parts of the figure, you know, to get the effect that he wanted. But this is so, you know, kind of, again, like Klimt, Art Nouveau sort of feel to the figure and the flow and the composition.
And the actual use of that thick paint to go in circles and, you know, up and down is just, and then the stroke right above from her elbow to above her head was put on after everything else was dry. And
Yeah.
you can see him taking that and just dragging it across.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you probably didn't put that on with a brush. You probably had like a sheet of cardboard or something like that, loaded up with paint and went across the top of it. And then, you know, let that dry, and he's gone back and he's chipped out parts of it, you know, actually cut back through it, scraped it, you know, to kind of create this very worn, kind of rough surface on it. So,
yeah. Well, it works, especially up near her hair.
You know, it almost feels to me like it needs to be rotated 90 degrees to the left.
We can do that.
The heavy,
Yes.
yes. The head angle. Yes. Now that feels better.
Okay. Yeah, it does kind of. Now she's laying down in a bed or something, right?
Right. But her when she's the other direction, her head seems to be, you know, extremely uncomfortable position or unnatural position.
Yeah. Yeah, it does in a way.
Do we know which way he painted it?
You know, I don't. You know, the way it came,
not that way.
Yeah, the way it was presented was like this. But right, you know, if you rotate it, it becomes a much more sort of subtle, passive painting. You know,
it shows it vertical on the website, his website.
Right. Yeah.
The other way. Yeah. Original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why it is the way it is. That's how it came from the website. Yeah, I didn't turn that intentionally, but yeah, it does actually feel better, you know, and has a, you know, very different message to it, you know, when it's horizontal. So
this one, the vertical one, seems to be more in motion than the, you know, if it's flipped and she's lying down.
Right. Yeah, it becomes a lot less passive. Right. Yeah, there's some activity there. It's almost like in a way, it's like she's kind of pulling back, or, you know, it's like she's seeing something and she's kind of drawing away from it. Where if it's, you know, horizontal, then it looks like, you know, she's relaxing in bed. Yeah.
Different feels.
Yeah. Now, this is actually one of my very favorite paintings of his. You know, I mean, I could probably spend a couple of weeks, you know, just looking at, I would love to see the actual original piece of this, just because of how it's constructed and all the different layers. And, what I'm referring to in particular is, again, this suggestion of a figure wearing a dress, very much so like Clint. And then all these, different interesting shapes, kind of decorative elements within there. The overpainting, the scraping, it's like, it just kind of creates this really rich sort of abstract surface. But then you contrast it against, this face. And all of a sudden it becomes a body,
That's a lot of hair unless she's lying down and has her hair spread out.
Yeah, he likes big hair,
Yeah, he does. Lots of hair.
Well, and so
But
do, and a lot of artists will take and exaggerate, hair, to kind of create interesting shape.
So do you think maybe he had different studies of this, with her maybe lying down with her hair spread out and went back in?
Yeah, he may have. I'm sure he didn't just jump in and do this paint. I can absolutely guarantee you that. I'm sure that he does a lot of thumbnail compositions. He probably does a lot of little abstract studies, trying to create, different surfaces and experimenting with layering and scraping away and cutting and, breaking into the surface again. Because he's really good at it. He's really good at it. And, so it's something that he practices on a fairly regular basis, because you don't get really good at it unless you play with it a lot. And you can see where he does. Yeah, this is a beautiful piece too.
It is. Almost looks unfinished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. It's in all of his pieces. It's like, what is finished. And here in particular, one of the things that I kind of picked up about the paint surface, it looks like he laid the paint down, and then he took something and he stamped into the paint. See these little, it's like he pressed something down into the paint while it was still kind of semi-wet, to kind of create, a relief and surface on that paint. So, it's very playful, very kind of inventive, about how he's creating and treating these surfaces.
And this very soft face, and then the very, the lines on that white piece just below the chin is very contrasting.
Yeah, yeah. And this almost, I would venture to guess, is maybe a piece of torn paper or something like that that's laid in.
Yeah, yeah. Gives the impression of a backwards collar or something.
Yeah,
but the contrast really pops the face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And the reason I think this is a paper, there's some kind of printed pattern or something on it. The dots here.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like they came with that surface. They weren't added in later. So.
Another one I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard not to like his work. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
You love him.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, you love him and hate him at the same time. it's like, you know, you really appreciate what he does, and yet at the same time, like, you know, damn, it's so nicely done. You know, just really nice control over the different elements.
And again, the soft face and hair, and then the starkness of the outfit and the starkness of the background is just, oh, there are two faces there too.
Yeah, I was going to point that out to you. Yes, it's not a figure, it's two figures.
Yeah.
So back to the couple thing. But yeah, you know, like these little bits of paint that are showing, you know, that are on top of the white, in fact, are not on top of the white.
They were scraped back off.
Yeah, yeah, he's cut back through the white to the color that was underneath.
Mm.
So he's chipped it out.
Is that something Klimt did too?
Not so much, you know, that's more of an abstract expressionist, you know, sort of
Okay.
approach. You know, but there's both, you know, there's overpainting, like in here, where he's, you know, laid down wet paint and then he's stamped into it or drawn into it or something to create surfaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there's areas like these where, you know, he's had color underneath and yet he's cut back through it, you know, to reveal the layer that was underneath it.
Mm. And at what point do you do that? When it's very dry?
Well, you can't wait till it's too dry.
Yeah,
know?
I was going to say that things I have picked off, you know, have come off when it's kind of still in that drying stage.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, you've got, and he's consciously, you know, done that. You know, he laid those initial colors down there and let them set up and dry thoroughly so that he could work back over it with this white layer of, and I'm wondering, you know, I don't know necessarily that the white layer over the top of this would be oil. I don't really know what he's using, but it's got to be something, you know, that will sort of resist, or the oil will resist, so that he can, you know, separate the layers. Because if he used like a traditional white oil paint, it would bond to that surface, and it wouldn't only pull up just the white, it would pull up the color underneath as well.
Except for a museum, you can't use acrylic over oil. You have to use fat paint over lean paint, or
Right.
it will eventually crack.
Yeah. And I'm, you know, that's one of the things I kind of wonder about, you know, with his work, is what is he using, you know, as that final kind of white layer that's giving him the ability to go back in and, you know, peel off parts of it.
You could scrape it off if the underlayer is very dry and the upper layer is still
Drying.
wet. Yeah.
Yeah, but this, because of the way, if you look at the edges, let me see, where's my cursor at? I'm getting a little lost. Okay. Like on this piece right here, if you look at the edges where it's kind of torn out, you know, it looks like the upper layer was fairly dry when he did that, you know, because this doesn't look like something that's just been cut through to let the color come out, because the edges are too, you know, sort of organic. You know, so it kind of
Torn looking.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how, you know, how he got that effect, you know, and, you know, and it, you know, it does bring up questions about, you know, will these pieces be archival, you know, because if this is a different kind of paint, it is actually resistant to the paint underneath it over time, you know, these will deteriorate.
I wonder if he used some kind of masking,
I don't know. Yeah.
where, you know, like torn pieces of tape or something that then they could paint over, let it dry, and then pull them up, and you can still salvage what's underneath there as well.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like I said,
Just call him up.
yeah,
Say, hey, how did you do that?
hey, I'll tell you what. Yeah, let's set up a Zoom meeting with him so we can take it home.
Does he give seminars?
I don't know. He does teach.
Okay.
He's teaching. In Denver. So he does classes, and in fact, I think he's due to be here in Atlanta in April at the American Portrait Society.
Oh, wow.
I think he may be doing a demonstration or a class there. So,
That would be interesting to attend.
it would be, wouldn't it?
It would.
If you've
We
got,
studied you.
if you've got I think to get in, it's like $450. It's a week-long conference.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it'll be here in Atlanta in April. And I may be taking the time off because I may be attending it. That's my birthday present to myself this year.
Happy birthday. Early.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Well,
would be
this
really-
is it's probably about the 7th or 8th year that the American Portrait Society has picked Atlanta, as their meeting place. And if they're
Why
going to,
is that?
oh, well, we have great conference facilities here.
Okay.
It's probably one of the easiest airports to fly into from any part of the world or country. So yeah, there's a lot of good reasons to have it in Atlanta. When the couple of years that I went to it, they were having it in Washington, D.C., and I drove up. And it's always a great, conference to go to.
Yeah, you have told us about it coming up and how wonderful it was.
Yeah. But, being able to sit well, you can't now, but, being able to meet, Dan Green and actually sit at a table and talk to him, like a regular person and just pick his brain. And, and Dan Green was not as nearly sedative in talking to him as he was in his videos. Yeah, he was actually, really interesting to talk to, and very knowledgeable, great guy. And that's the thing, you go to these conferences, you actually meet these people and, you have like real live, conversations with them. So it would be, I'd love to meet this guy and just, kind of have a couple hours to sit around and talk about painting with him. Yeah. But again, very different look to it, but how much like Klimt's work, this reminds me of. And by the way, I've always been like a big fan of Klimt. Klimt is like probably one of my all-time favorite artists.
This one gives a feel of just being, I don't know how to quite put it. It's like austere.
Anybody else got anything to say about any of these?
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, you're all being too quiet.
I am growing in my appreciation of deconstructive art, but I have a long way to go before I appreciate it more.
Okay. So is that a way of you saying that you don't particularly like these?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not, because I guess because where I am in my own drawing ability, and I'm just right back at square ABC, and these people are eons beyond me at a place that I don't really care for or appreciate.
Mhm.
But to each their own, and God bless them. And I am listening to you go on and on about them and trying just to appreciate them.
Okay. All right. And, you know, here's the thing. And you brought up a great point, Rebecca. You know, the fact is we're all at different places, you know, and where, you know, maybe I have, you know, 50 or well, it's, you know, yeah, at least 50 years of experience in painting. And I look at some of the things that are going on the surface, they mean something very different to me than they do to you.
Right.
Yeah. And that's fine. You know, you know,
I think paintings like this are extremely indicative of what's gone before and what's here now. And you, because of your lifetime study of art, have an appreciation for all the different art cycles and trends that have gone before. And so when you look at that painting, you see eons more than I do because I don't have that experience or background. But I appreciate the artist's effort, even if I don't quite understand all of the history behind it.
yeah.
I love this. I love his style, you know, how his style has evolved. I love it. I have no idea how to do it personally, but I love it. So, yeah, I'll be looking at a lot of his videos in the future to try to figure some of that out.
Yeah. Well, here's the problem you'll have is that as far as I've been able to find so far, you know, you can find websites with his work. You know, he's got several websites that he puts work on. And if you're on Facebook, there are several artists who will post, you know, work of his, you know, as examples, like on portrait painters and I want to say contemporary. What's that? It's a page on Facebook, like, you know, contemporary painters or something like that. I'll have to go back and find it. But you can.
I found, you know, as we were looking at this, I found a ton of videos on YouTube about the man.
Okay.
And so there's a lot out there. Plus, he's got Ron Hicks art. So there's a lot out there, I think, to look at.
Okay. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. And if you could, you know, since you've gone to YouTube and stuff, can you send me some links to some of those, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, just send them.
Yeah, I'll go through and send you some links. Some of them are news articles. He actually taught at a grade school, apparently. But you know, I don't know what it said because I didn't take the focus off what we were doing here. Right. Yeah. But I just saved down what I could find. And I had to piece through a lot of other stuff that wasn't about him to find videos about him, but he's done a lot of videos. Now, as far as his technique goes, I doubt it. You know, I doubt if I'll learn that much off of most of the videos, but but yeah, he's had a lot of stories done about him.
Okay. So yeah, if you'll take any of the links and stuff, you know, that you think are pertinent and send to me, you know, yeah, I'd love to look at them.
Will you shoot them back out, Charles?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll be happy to share them, or you know, we'll take a look at them in, you know, in the class, you know, on Mondays or Wednesdays. Okay.
Yeah, his technique is. I just love to see him teaching.
Yeah, I don't know how much. I doubt if the videos really explain too much of his technique. I wish they did. But I'll be going through some of them. I tend to do that from this class. I tend to look at different artists that you talk about in this class because I had no background in art and no background in art history, you know, until very recently. So I need to catch up. I really need to learn.
Yeah. Well, then I have done my job, see, because that is the whole point, is to, kind of get you guys to not necessarily, just take what's in the class here, but to go out and find things, to develop a curiosity or interest, and go out and actually, do some of your own research, find some of these, find artists. I was having a conversation with Wanda, via email, and, she wanted me to show, more African-American artists. Okay, that's fine, and I'm happy to do that. But, don't leave it to me to go out and find all these things for you. The class itself, yes, I'm moderating it, I'm trying to teach, but, make suggestions, if there's
Okay, so more interactive.
right. So yeah,
Okay.
if there's particular artists that you want to hear more about, let me know. I'll be happy to take the time. I'm out there digging on the internet and books and everything else, anyway. And so if I have a direction to go look, like for example, Veronica brought up an artist, last name is Guzman, and and so I'm looking at his stuff right now, and trying to figure out and put together something on him, because she wanted to see, more of his work. And
He might be open to coming on Zoom with us for a short period of time.
The guy you recommended, Guzman?
Yeah.
Okay.
He might be. I'm not,
Mm-hmm. How do you know him, or how do you know of him?
Okay, we're going to have to go offline for that.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And Veronica, we can do that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I really want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a story you may not want to hear. So. All right. And that's fine. Okay. But yeah. After class today, maybe we can have a phone conversation or something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I started looking at some of his work, and so I guess my question to you, and I think this is fair to ask, is okay. What is it that interests you about the work that he's doing?
I like that he does plein air. I like that his colors are really bright.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases. So I just thought that maybe I'm familiar, so the other, my other classmates here might enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and yeah, if like I said, if you guys know of someone, or maybe there's somebody that you've been looking at for, a good number of years, and really kind of appreciate what they do. Yeah, I'm perfectly open to, taking suggestions, on who to kind of look up and talk about, because it makes it more interesting for all of us. I don't know if you guys have spent any time really thinking about, what I do to put one of these classes together, but the class itself is just kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
a lot of
always
work.
a culmination of what you know to date.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, look, there's what, I don't know, 12 of us here, 11 of us here now. And so, we all see different things, because we're all kind of connected into the world, in different groups and things like that. And so, if there's people that you know about, don't assume that I know about them, and if you want to share them, by all means, send me an email, or send me a link, to something on them, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. And, and then we can put something together, right?
It doesn't matter if they're dead or alive, right?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
And, that speaking of, I mean, he's certainly alive.
Yes.
And, I've posed this theory of mine that probably some of the most talented artists of all time are out there walking around in the world at this very minute. Probably some of the names in art history that will outshine even the painters from the Renaissance and everything are alive today.
Well, there are more people that are alive today, so the odds are.
That's right. It's a percentage
Yep.
thing. Yep. Yeah, we have more Leonardo da Vinci's out there walking around, that have not been, deemed Leonardo da Vinci yet.
Well, maybe they are engineers right now, but they go
Right.
home and do other things.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you give it 100, 150 years, and, the people walking around today are going to be the icons of tomorrow. They will. And the fact is, we don't know about them, because they're sitting in the coffee shop next to us, and we haven't really been introduced to them yet. So it's an interesting thought, but yeah, there's a lot of talent out there, and there's so many things going on, and the society that we live in is so rich with skills, artistic skills, imagination, but not only that, the technical part of it, the materials that we can work with today that were never available to those people 300-400 years ago. We can do things today that they could not even begin to imagine. So,
Blow their minds.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would look at the world today, it would be totally unrecognizable to them.
And their art would probably be a whole lot different than it was.
Oh, yeah, if they had any of the influences of today, absolutely. Do you think
That would be an interesting, I'd love to see movies on that. I just bring back.
Yeah, I mean, think just for a second. What would Leonardo da Vinci be like, if he had tubes of paint readily available to him? What would he be like if he had a graphite pencil instead of silver point? It would have totally changed his art. It would totally change what he could do.
Maybe not even be recognizable in comparison.
No, it would have been a totally different thing. I mean, speaking of Leonardo, one of my favorite people in the world, who's a good friend of mine, who I've been painting with for over 30 years now. His name is Cecil Warfel. I went to, Shane's group on Sunday in the evening, and we painted this model. Well, Cecil loves to draw. And so Cecil showed up with, several prepared boards and, and a silver stick to do silver point. And he was sitting there doing silver point drawings of the model that I painted, while we were there, which was fun to see because, silver point is certainly old school. You don't get much more old school than that. So
What is silver point?
silver point is, before graphite, and, charcoal has been around forever. But, the problem with charcoal is if you're drawing on, pieces of parchment or paper or something like that, and particularly in like sketchbook, they don't last long, and your drawings mush together from each side of the page. But, so artists have always been looking for a way of drawing in a book and then the drawings being preserved. You don't have to do anything, to keep them. So what silver point is it's just really a stick of silver, or a little silver wire. It's pure silver, and then the way that you use it is that you take a piece of paper and you put a gesso ground, and gesso, now I said gesso, I didn't say acrylic gesso, because they're two different animals. You know, actual gesso is it's put together with what they call a rabbit skin glue or binder, and the calcium or chalk is mixed into it, you know, into you know, like a fine paint, and then it's put on the surface of a piece of wood or paper or parchment and let dry flat. And what you have there is a surface where when you take the silver and you scratch across it with the calcium or the chalk, there's a reaction. You know, the silver drags off onto it, but because there's a chemical reaction between the two, it puts down like a colored line. And at first it's a very kind of faint, almost kind of like pale beige or bronze colored line. But over time, you know, over several weeks, the drawing will continue to oxidize and become clearer, you know, and more visible, you know, on the paper.
Mm.
And that's the way that Da Vinci drew, you know, was with silver point for the most part. So, you know, he didn't have graphite available to him. So, you know, those sketchbooks and stuff, you know, he also used what they call gall ink, you know, which is, you know, basically, I think it's taken either from a sheep or a pig, you know, their bladder, and there's a substance in there that they would turn into an ink that you could use with a quill pen. And so those were pretty common, you know, writing and drawing materials at the time. You know, and we've gone way, way, way past that now. So we don't use those anymore. But that's, you know, when you were talking about the 13th and 14th centuries, you know, that's what you were looking at as something available to you to either draw with or, you know, or write with.
So they didn't have India ink.
Not at the time, no.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think India ink came into existence really until around about the 1700s, 1700s.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that
as it implies, it came from India,
mhm.
and I believe India ink. I think I think it's made. The base of it is indigo.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking back through this. How the heck did we record all the information we know?
Mhm.
You know, there's the printing press, which I can see how that spread information.
Yeah.
But prior to that, there was just, you know, lots of writings, and how did they write down stuff?
Well, you know, you had the Dark Ages, right? And you remember the,
Yeah.
you know, what they called the Illuminations. You know, basically books, you know, which were not paper. Okay. Again, they were all parchment, which was animal skin, because again, you know, paper didn't really come into existence in Europe really until like probably about the 15th century, you know, and paper came from China and Japan.
I thought it was papyrus.
Well, there was papyrus, which came from Egypt,
Right.
but papyrus is not really paper. Again, it's a plant
Reeds.
fiber. Yeah, that's been sort of, you know, mashed and pounded together and then made into layers. It's paper-like, but it's not paper.
So
It was in Japan and in China that they started actually using like fibers, like silk and cotton and things like that, and then breaking the fibers apart and then making a slurry and then pouring it into a mold and letting it settle and dry into a sheet of paper.
Boy, and we just go out and buy any kind of paper at binders.
Yeah.
Charles, question about
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the old time, in the time, for example, the time of Jesus, the people from Israel, they used to make those rolls and write everything. So what kind of material they use in that time?
Yeah, but those scrolls are parchment.
Oh, there were no paper.
Yeah, it was not paper.
And it was so rare that they have now discovered with all the new technology that there are several overwritings on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, you know, if you were able to acquire a piece of parchment to write on, that was like a piece of gold. It was so rare. It was so hard to get. It's not, yeah, it's not something that people would normally encounter. And remember that really up until, you know, through different periods of time, you know, the vast majority of people were illiterate. They didn't read. They didn't write.
Mm-hmm.
See? So it was really only people who were the elite, you know, in those societies who had access to materials like that.
Yeah, I just found out through my genealogy, I have some Latimers behind my mom's side.
Hello.
And doing research on that, Latimer was a person who actually learned to read and write, and in Latin.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello, may I have a comment? Hello?
John saying something?
Yeah, I've been trying to get back on topic, Ron Hicks, and I was curious as to what Rebecca said a while back, that she didn't really like or appreciate his art because she was not at that level that he's at. And I was just curious as to what, you know, the same thing would go toward literature or toward music. I mean, we're not going to all be at the level of what we see and hear, and that does not mean we don't appreciate it, though.
Yeah.
Did I misunderstand you, Rebecca?
Okay, we're not going to start World War III again, are we?
No.
But I was just
No.
curious.
All right, John, you and I can have this conversation privately, and I'll tell you how I really feel.
Okay.
And it's emotional. And because it's emotional, it gets misinterpreted. And I do not want to waste anybody's time fussing about what I feel about something out there and the way it affects me, because I'm different from everybody else, and so are you.
Yeah.
Oh, we all are. Yes. Most assuredly. Okay.
Well,
We'll do-
Rebecca, I think it would be interesting to hear what you feel, because everybody has different feelings about everything. And I think hearing that might open up other viewpoints or worlds
But
to
I
the
agree.
rest of us.
I want to start World War III again.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
no, true. I'm more than willing to share that at the appropriate time. However, I think Charles has done a marvelous job of trying to make sure that we see tons of things that we don't particularly like or agree with. And the reason for that is, for me, it comes down to a question that I ask myself whenever I see any piece of art is, who has the authority to call that a piece of art? And then I stop to consider what Charles has done, in that he's had decades of experience being exposed to different kinds of art styles. I have not, but I do know what appeals to my eye. And much of the deconstructive art in particular, I don't care for because it just looks confusing. It looks unkempt. It looks disorganized. It looks unattractive. It looks like something that I don't really understand. And so it's not really fair for me to criticize it or say, oh, it's awful, because in somebody else's point of view, like Charles is going on and on about, I could look at that painting for 2 weeks. And to me, I come back to my original question. Who has the authority to call that art? And then I have to just backpedal and say different strokes for different folks.
No, I agree. It's like we were talking the other day, who judges these contests? You know, again, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Art contest, submit your art. Veronica was talking about submitting her art. But like you said, who judges these? What's, you know, again, it's an individual preference.
So Gwen, I'm trying to come from a personal point of view, which we all do, trying to be democratic. I have my personal preferences based on color, choice of subject, organization, whether or not the topic, I identify with it at all. And so it's just like water off a duck's back to me. I don't care for a lot of contemporary art because I personally consider it not attractive. There's tons of art that I do consider attractive, but many things I don't. And that's a personal preference.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you.
Yeah. And look, you know, I mean, it's, you know, that's kind of the broader point of all of this is that in presenting a class like this, or really any kind of art class, you're going to have people who, you know, you like a particular thing, you know, they don't like something else. You know, a good example of that, how, you know, is, I'm assuming that everybody listens to music, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of some sort.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, some music you really like, right? Some music, you know, makes you feel good. You know, you kind of want to move with it, you know, and you know, it's fun, or makes you feel good. Other music, you know, it's hard to relate to, you know. You know, you don't, you hear it.
Almost like art.
Yeah, it in some ways, you know, it disturbs you. You know, it doesn't makes you feel uneasy or something, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing.
Gut reactions.
Yeah, the same thing with painting. The same thing with, you know, anything in life. You know, and so, and it's not a good bad, you know, comparison. You know, it's how do you react to it? And I think the deeper question gets to, okay, that piece of art made me feel uncomfortable, okay? Or I don't like it. What don't I like about it? Why don't I like it? You know? And I think it's more important on a personal level for each of us to look at things and figure out, you know, why do we have that kind of reaction to, you know, what we're looking at or hearing or reading, you know, or whatever.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, where does that come from? Because it really speaks more to who we are as people than necessarily the person or the culture or the place that it, you know, was created. You know, and so, you know, it's probably not something you want to spend your whole life doing, you know, as the main activity, you know, but every once in a while, it's good to just kind of stop and think, okay, you know, when I listen to P. Diddy, okay, for example, you know, why do I want to turn the radio off? You know, okay.
Yep.
You know, is it the lyrics? You know, is it what he's saying? You know, is it the sound of it? You know, I mean, what is it that, you know, bothers me? And maybe, you know, and you know, I'm not suggesting that anybody torture themselves, okay, but maybe I need to look into this further and kind of find out, you know, what he's all about. You know, what's he actually trying to do? You know, what's his message here? You know, so I get a, you know, maybe, you know, maybe it's easier for me to go through the world, you know, and leave the radio station, you know, in the car, you know, on the same station and not have to change it, you know, every time they play some of his music, you know, if I begin to understand a little bit more about, you know, who he is and, you know, what he's all about.
There's only two kind of music that drive me crazy. Elevator music and
Only
rap.
two?
Huh?
Only two?
But by now, elevator music and rap, I can't stand.
Okay.
Sorry.
Rap and elevator music. Wow. You know, but then again, Armando, I have to kind of challenge you on that because, you know,
Yeah, okay.
different people have different ideas of what elevator music is. You know?
Depending on where the elevators have been.
Well, and you know,
You remember in the past when we used to have an elevator person there running the elevator and they used to have that music.
Yeah.
But now we
Thank
don't have
God we
elevators.
didn't have to walk up the steps.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, Armando, you know, Muzak and those companies, you know, they designed that music for a specific reason, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they basically wanted to make people feel passive and sedate. No, seriously.
Yeah.
That was the purpose of the music. Okay.
So they would not attack each other on the elevator.
Right. It was meant to lower people's aggressive responses. Right. You know, and they played it in retail stores, you know, public venues, you know, things like that, specifically for the purpose that the vast majority of people had a reaction of it brought down their stress levels. That's what it did.
Musicology.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I know that is that actually the agency that I worked at, you know, Muzak was actually one of our clients. So, you know, little side note. But, okay, it's 11:55, and we will save the still life presentation for another day. Okay?
All right. See you tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. You know.
I enjoyed this, Charles.
Yeah.
Yes.
I hope you guys, you know, found something in there, you know, to get and kind of enjoy and at least question, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to see the videos of this guy. It just opened up a whole nother realm of painting and where you can go to me.
Yeah. And, you know, I kind of offer to any of you, you know, I mean, you know, you may not want to copy his approach, you know, specifically, but there's things that you can borrow, learn, techniques that you could experiment with, play with, you know, and have a great deal of fun. And like I said, you know, who was it? I think it was either Salvador Dali or it was Picasso that said that great artists steal.
Oh.
No, they borrow.
I think originally it was said steal. I think it was toned down to borrow.
Borrow, okay.
Yeah. But what does that really mean? You know, what it really means is that, you know, being visual people, you know, we're out in the world and we see all kinds of things, right? And we as creative people can look at anything and borrow, you know, from nature, from other artists, from other cultures, from anything that we experience in our life. And it's fertile ground for us to, you know, play with, you know, to be creative with. And we should.
Yeah, back from I go back to the earliest cave drawings that and paintings, and they just amaze me constantly.
Mhm. Yeah.
The simplicity, and yet they have everything about that animal's movement.
Oh yeah, yeah. They knew their subject. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so for those of you who want to run out and grab lunch, things like that, it's that time, right?
There he is.
He's back.
Back again.
Back again. Yeah. I had forgotten that yesterday I had linked this computer to my phone.
Oh,
Oh,
And so, yeah, it's running off of the hotspot on my phone.
Right.
And so when somebody calls in,
mm.
it interrupts. So I'm going to have to take it off of that, unfortunately.
Right.
Go back on
Okay.
go back on the house Wi-Fi. But luckily it didn't happen a lot today. So yeah, I'm not in big demand today on the phone, which is great.
Charles, I do have a question about that. Would that be why I'm getting a message on my end saying that my internet connection is unstable? That happened about 3 times, and the entire picture stopped and then restarted.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically it's something interfering with, the internet signal,
Right.
either going into your house or, I mean, how are you connecting to the internet? Are you using,
Wi-Fi.
yeah, but your Wi-Fi at your house, or are you using Wi-Fi off of like a hotspot on your phone or something like that?
No, we have Wi-Fi in our
Yeah.
home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So AT&T or something like that. Okay. Yeah. And I do here too, but because I'm at one end of the house from the router, than where it's sitting.
I'm directly below the router. It's
Yeah.
upstairs.
Yeah, some days I get like really good reception and everything's fine. Other days it gets a little iffy.
Yeah.
And so I, I'll switch over to using my phone hotspot as a backup, or the county gave me a hotspot as well, that I'll use.
Well, when that happens to me, should I turn on my cell phone
No,
simultaneously?
no, it just means that basically you're not getting a clear internet signal at that time. Usually just give it a few minutes to clear up. If I'm in the middle of a class though, I can't,
It's very difficult to hear you finishing your sentences.
well, yeah.
I want to hear the whole idea.
Yeah, if all of a sudden the screen freezes and I'm like,
Yeah, we saw you freeze up.
yeah, it makes it a little inconvenient. So yeah, so I have a couple of backup systems here to switch over to, in the case that, it's just like one of those bad days, and that's what yesterday was. I started off on the home Wi-Fi and I switched over to the hotspot to finish the class because literally, I mean, it's like, the signal just kind of like went away like twice yesterday. And so when I switched over to the hotspot, at least I can rely on it, consistently. So
I mean, gosh, think of what if we were without that, we'd all be on a telephone and maybe only 1-to-1 instead of 1-to-many.
oh,
Right.
yeah. Technology, for as much of a pain in the neck as it is sometimes, it's
Amazing stuff.
yeah, it's still, mind-boggling, that we can do the things that we can do right now. Yeah. So I'm very appreciative of it. Believe me.
I am too. Thank God. It's
Definitely.
been a lifesaver during the COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Anyway, so on that happy note, okay, I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is a share day. So if you've been working on something, even if you've been scratching out some thumbnails or something like that, ideas, share them with us. Let's see what you've been thinking about.
I thought you were gonna say, and if you go back and scratch off the paint on some of your paintings.
Well, if today inspired you to take
Whatever, right?
a paint scraper to a couple of your paintings, and you kind of uncovered a couple of earlier paintings from that, and you want to share it with us, we're willing to look at it. Okay.
Sounds
We're
good.
learning to
I
be
may go
decent
back and
today.
scratch.
All righty. Anyway, thank you all.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye,
Get 'em
everyone.
off.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.